Okay.
Going live? Okay, we're live and welcome everybody to our session with Priyanka Pathak. Am I pronouncing your surname correct? Great.
Yeah, that's
So,
close.
Priyanka is an Indian American product and service designer and technologist, and as well a global health specialist. So currently, she is founder and principal at Samaj Studio, a design firm for global health. And she also teaches graduate students at Arizona State University School of Design. So please, Priyanka, go ahead. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Maria. Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here today at World Class Designer with all of you. Let me pull up my slides so that I can begin sharing. So before I start sharing my slides, I did want to say I'm not going to be able to look at the screen or I won't be able to look at your questions in the chat as I'm talking about or doing my presentation. So what I'm going to do instead is I will talk for maybe 15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to actually turn off my slides and we're going to do an interactive activity where we're going to talk about some principles that we can come up with together for the role of Western designers in the design space. Hopefully that works for you all. Yeah, so then let's get started. Okay, so let me start by telling you a bit about what I'm going to talk about today. First, I'll tell you a bit about myself so you know who is, of course, giving this talk. And I've been working in the space of design and international development and specifically, around social impact for over a decade now. And so I thought it would be interesting for the purposes of this talk to go back to when I first started in this field around 2010 or so, and walk you through some of the changes that I have seen in the design world, especially in all the design work that's happening in Africa over the last decade or so, just so that we can all really appreciate what it took to get to this point where we are able to have an incredible world-class designer conference like this. And also we'll look at the future a little bit to see what changes are coming. And given all that context, then the second half of my 25-minute allotment, and we're going to spend talking about some different ways that Western-based designers like myself and many others can think about how to redefine our roles in light of all the great changes that are happening in the world today. And the last maybe 10 minutes or so, I'm going to open it up to all of you so we can all work on some, like I said, some principles together that we can think about following as we continue to do our work. So let me tell you a bit about who I am. So as Maria so kindly introduced, my name is Priyanka. I work primarily as a product and service designer, although my background is actually in technology and in engineering. So I have a background in computer science and information systems, health informatics, and also in artificial intelligence and deep learning. But I work in global health. So I have applied all my design and tech skills for mostly the global health space, like I said, for the last decade or so. And I've worked in other areas as well, some in finance, education, agriculture, other things, but global health is mostly what I focus on. And like I said, my work is about social impact, and that is a space that I have been in all this time. And I realized that I didn't put that into my session description specifically, but everything that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be from the lens of design for social impact, and specifically in Africa. And just to repeat some of what Maria told you already, I am the founder and principal of a small design firm called Samaj Studio. We focus on global health and tech applications of design around the world. And I also teach at Arizona State University. They have a design school with a really cool set of master's programs around innovation and design. And yeah, I'm one of the faculty members for that program. Before this, I worked at Dahlberg Design. I know you heard from some of my former colleagues and friends at the rest of this conference, Mahara O'Brien, Tosh Juma, a lot of great superstars who are here today. And I was also an ICT and innovation specialist at the World Bank for some time, among many other things. I'm not going to waste any of my precious time here talking about myself too much. But yes, so let's take it back to around 2010, which was when I got my start in this field. From the beginning of my career, I had wanted to work internationally, and I had all this expertise and experience in technology, but I had really wanted to focus on ways to find opportunities to think about what how tools could be used and not just, how they could be built. I was interested in the broader aspect of it. And so I like to say that I fell into design. But since I've been in it such a long time, I thought it would be interesting to see where designing across all these different projects in Africa got its start. And I would say that the first really big project in this space started about 2010 or so, and it was a partnership between Frog Design, which many of you may know, a really large international design firm, and UNICEF. And that project was well, it was actually a series of different projects, but I believe their big flagship project that was part of it all, called the Mobile Mandate Project, was Project Mwana, and it was a partnership with UNICEF Zambia, where they spent some time working with health centers and clinicians and patients as well to really try and find a way to improve the early diagnosis of HIV. And this was sort of a landmark project because up until that point, the design space designers generally had been more or less confined to the corporate space. Designers were focusing on things like, designing fancy new phones or a mouse for a computer or everyday products that were mostly used in a Western context. And this represented the first major foray of a design firm into trying to actually, put their design skills and experiences to work to actually make a difference in a community outside of themselves. And so after that project took off, it really got a lot of attention from not just other donors in the space, but just other design firms that were out there. And yet I still feel at the early stages, 2010 to 12 or so, there weren't many people at all who were doing design work in international development. I've listed these three here because these are the ones that I knew at that time who were doing this work. Frog, of course, they spent a good amount of time and money on opening even a small office out in Tanzania and South Africa to actually take on some of this work. UNICEF was a major partner of theirs, especially the innovation team, which still does focus on some human-centered design projects to this day. And lastly, Reboot is a great firm that has been around for quite some time, and they also were one of the first firms to really emphasize the use of human-centered design and that methodology and approach towards international development projects. So, it started to take off around 2013 or so, I would say. And this is when more and more players started to come into this space. So then IDEO came in and they started opening offices in India and in Nairobi and in other places. Dahlberg Design also took off. Dahlberg, my former employer, was founded by two ex-Frog people. And so they were actually the ones who were running a lot of the Project Juanas and the work that they were doing previously there at Frog. And they opened an entirely new design firm dedicated to it. There was also the Prekout Foundation based out of South Africa. And even over the course of this time, there were still some smaller firms that were in play. My firm, Smudge Studio, I started it around 2018 or so, but even still, there's plenty of others. There's one called Grid Impact I've worked with. There's other design collectives like Sonder and all out there, plenty. But as you can see, this was the period when most people really started to understand the value of design and how it could actually bring a different lens to the design space. And I think it's really important to think about why that was the case. And up until that point, and even arguably now, the default mode for international development projects is top down. So it's big organizations with their headquarters in DC or New York or where have you, making decisions for how projects will go in other countries. For many, many years, that's really just how things went. That was the accepted way of doing business. I could go into how that has its roots in colonialism and all kinds of other historical lessons, but that's a separate talk, I would say. But still, when faced with that inherent traditional model of international development, when people started paying more attention to human-centered design and design as a methodology that really emphasizes getting to know your users, getting to know the constituents you're working with, involving all kinds of different stakeholders, that represented a fundamental shift in the way that people started thinking about the role of designers or of the work that social impact people focus on. And yeah, and I think that's one reason that it became such a big driver in the space. There were many people who were interested in the potential of it. So okay, so that's kind of where we started. We could see this trickle of firms starting, other people starting to see that design is an interesting methodology, get on board, start opening up their own firms. But as these companies started to open up, not only did the design space and those few partners that were working in the space start to pay more attention to it, but also funders and governments and other major INGOs really started to take note of it as well, because they realized that, the champions of design within these organizations, I should say, realized that, like I said, utilizing a design methodology really led to better outcomes for the projects that they were working on, which at the end of the day is what they were hoping for, right? And there were there were a couple of different moments over the course of the last 10 years that I think really did a lot to bring attention to design. One of them is the Bill and Melinda Gates themselves. Here's a quote from Melinda Gates that I know I've used in presentations in the past. Really, she's just talking about how, if you let the people that you're working with participate in the process of doing the work and of serving others, then um, they at the end of the day are going to know best what's best for them, right? Who are we to say we know what's best for you and you don't know anything about what you need for your own community? That's just not true in many cases. And so for Melinda Gates, who's such a powerful figure, to be acknowledging this openly in many of the talks she gave and books that she was writing and things like that, she was quite a prominent voice in really, again, drawing attention to the power of design for international development. And in fact, in 2013, Bill Gates co-edited an edition of Wired magazine, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a major tech magazine globally. And he and Bill Clinton co-authored this, or co-edited, I should say, this edition of Wired. And in it, I couldn't find the actual picture of the actual article itself, but there was an article where they talked specifically about human-centered design and the power of being able to really bring in the folks that you're working with, and again, turn that whole traditional model of development upside down on its head. So this is really when it started to catch attention and people were starting to see, oh, this represents an opportunity for change in how we do the work that we've been doing so traditionally for so long, right? And this came as a surprise to lots of people in the space, although anybody who's a designer could tell you that this is not surprising. But if you co-design with the community members that you are trying to work with, you will get better services if you involve them, if you really make sure you do your research and understand people's contexts and circumstances and reasons for doing what it is that they do. You can offer them better products, offer them better services, help people figure out how to raise themselves rather than coming in and just deciding what the answer is, right? So with the advent of this trend, you can see here, design firms really started to invest a lot in opening offices across Africa. And again, these are just the ones that I know. I'm sure that there are probably others out there that didn't get included on this map. I did just want to illustrate, over the course of the last maybe 5-7 years, how different offices or different companies started opening different offices in Kampala, Nairobi, and Joburg, Abuja, Dakar, across many parts of the African continent. And even more exciting, homegrown African firms started to open up as well. Again, this is not by any means a comprehensive list. I am sure I am missing plenty of really great design firms who work in social impact on this list, but just ones that I've personally worked with and known. There's Yux Design in Dakar, there's Mango Tree in Kampala, Matchboxology in Johannesburg. Again, just several of many. And this is so exciting because 10 years ago, we couldn't even have dreamed that this would be the case. And this is at the end of the day how it should be, right? Being able to empower people to make change in their own communities. Like that's ultimately what this design is all about. And of course, we can't forget that now there's also a huge amount of design talent coming out of these really great schools. Tosh, who was a speaker earlier, I know he talked a bit about the Nairobi Design Institute that he helped found. World Class Designer, which we are all here at, is also going to be a school from what I understand. So that's really cool. There's a lot more initiatives going on to train talent in different countries, different communities across the continent, which is so wonderful to see. So having understood all this context, having seen the change over the last decade or so in how not only the space of social impact and international development has really taken advantage of the design movement to make change in their own work, I thought it's really important for us meaning Western designers, but also all designers generally working in this space, to really take stock of the situation and take a minute to really think through a really important question, which is how do we now redefine our role as Western designers? If we're not going to be doing this traditional model anymore of, oh, let's fly out people from New York and DC or London or wherever to come and work on projects across Africa, which is great. I mean, maybe there's value to that, of course, but in general, it shouldn't be just Westerners coming in to solve other people's problems, right? Given that that's now becoming a much more accepted idea, a much more uh, idea that people really believe in and support more widely now. How do we think about what it is that we need to change for our own roles moving forward? So I thought I would get us started. I have a couple thoughts that I've put down in here, but yeah, so in about 5 minutes, I'm going to turn it over to you guys so we can also start hearing from you all, because I am not the expert on this by any means. This is very much a community conversation, and yeah, so here's some of my thoughts. So first, how can we all, we meaning Western designers once again, continue to support design projects, especially in Africa and other parts of the world as well, without taking over, right? Without coming in and saying, this is what you should be doing, this is what's best, etc. Really letting the design process take the stage. So one idea is thinking about the different types of roles that you can play. Perhaps you're not coming in and being the creative lead on a project. Maybe you're not the person, setting the direction necessarily, or thinking about exactly what ideas need to be executed on. Maybe now you can be a technical advisor. Maybe you can come in and support the designers that you're working with in your community and just offer them support on the design process, or on certain technical aspects that maybe you have an expertise in and they need, right? Basically, maybe moving a little bit, taking a step back and letting somebody else sort of shine and take the lead on the creative aspect of it, because they would probably know better than you would, right? Another is to really prioritize hiring local talent over bringing somebody in from abroad. And I know that this is something that the industry is still working on. And part of the problem, I think, for some time was that there weren't too many folks working in design in different countries in Africa for quite some time. And so I think that's why people felt that they had to bring folks from the outside or from outside countries. But that's just not true anymore. I mean, I just showed you how many different African design firms there are. There's schools who are continuing to graduate really great people. So now it's becoming easier and easier and much more possible to actually hire somebody who is possibly even from the community that you're trying to work in to work on a project. Another is, of course, this may sound obvious, but it's still something that we have to keep in mind, which is really staying true to the spirit of what design even means and letting the community, letting the users, whoever that may be, lead the way, instead of coming in with the attitude of, oh, I've done these a million times before, I know exactly what works here. Just letting what you're learning, letting the research, letting users guide the project moving forward and seeing where things go. Another question that we can also ask is a bigger one, but it's still one that I do think is worth grappling with and spending a lot of time thinking about, which is how can we really rebalance all the historical imbalances of power that there have been? The examples I gave of all these Western firms coming in and doing work across Africa, that's just one example. There's, again, I in 25 minutes, I couldn't possibly go into the history of all the power structure differences, right? But I think we all can understand and acknowledge that there has been traditionally a power imbalance, and that's something that as Western designers have to think about and find ways to correct, right? So one is to use our influence to promote local talent and really raise and lift them and highlight them as much as possible, since we have that audience and that visibility. And yeah, really just making sure that we can support people who we know to be talented as best as we can. Another is actually putting your money where your mouth is and investing in local talent and people who in communities who want to work on design, who want to take the lead on projects in their own communities. And similarly for organizations who are also trying to do the same, whether that's trying to get them on grants, trying to get partnerships with them. There's a million ways that this could play out, but yeah, I think this is more of a financial aspect of it. And lastly, well, not lastly, there's one more point, but again, this is such a simple sounding point, but it's quite powerful, which is just acknowledging that there is an imbalance there. I don't think it does anybody any good to pretend that that's not the case. I think you just need to understand that as Westerners, maybe it's time that we take a little bit of a step back and let the people who really know what they're doing and really understand their communities take the lead, and that's okay. And in fact, that's how it should be, right? So just accepting that and really trying to build that into your work. And this is the very last point before we go into discussion. I think and this is something that I myself have been working on, which is think about, if your job has been to work in other countries all this time, as mine has been, frankly, what can you work on in your own backyard? I don't think that there's any secret about how, Western societies, we're all facing all kinds of problems on our own. And I mean, if we're going to continue to survive as a world together, we need to be working on all of our problems. And there's plenty, I'm sure. If you look in your own communities and look in, the places where you have roots and connections, I'm sure that there's also issues and problems that you can work on solving there. And I know that's something I personally am thinking about and trying to build into my own career. So since I've been talking all this time, I'm going to turn off my screen share, or make it so that I guess you can all see this typing thing that I'll just type in here. But I thought it would be nice to get to hear from some of you. I would love to think through some principles that we can all consider together. And this can come from you regardless of whether you consider yourself a Western designer or not. Yeah, just thinking about some different guidelines that we can keep in mind as we navigate this transition from coming in and working on projects in other countries to maybe building up and supporting local talent. I'm going to take 1 second to look at all this Q&A. A lot of questions that I will try to answer, but says, why is this not a conversation? That's actually a really great point. It should very much be a conversation, and I couldn't agree with you more, Allison. That's something that I know I have been trying to raise awareness of throughout all this time. But I thought this conference would be a great opportunity to at least get these questions out there and start getting people aware of, okay, these are the questions I need to be asking as I work with the African design community and work with people who, at the end of the day, know best, right, for what their communities are going to need. And that's not going to be me because I'm not part of that. So you're absolutely right. This does need to be a conversation with the broader community. But I was hoping that this would be a start to where that conversation could go and begin. Let's look at the chats. Great. Okay, so we've got some recommendations here. Let's pull these up. Empower talent with tools. Yes, that's great. I'm going to start writing some of these down. So empower talent. Let's put African talent with tools to succeed. And yeah, deliver same quality. Yeah, absolutely. And that includes having access to resources, right? And being able to do the same kind of work. Madhurya, sorry if I'm saying your names incorrectly, says be respectful, empathetic, and humble. I love that. That's really great. Respectful, empathetic, and humble. I think that alone is a pretty broad statement right there. And I think that's maybe should even move to the top. It should be pretty high up on the list. Yes, mentoring, that is a great point. And that's actually one that I didn't include in my bullets, and maybe I should have. Mentoring is an awesome way to give back. Sharing the wealth of skills and experience that you might have with somebody who, again, may not have had access to the same resources is an awesome way. Let's see. Allison, let's see, we need to be asking. Yes, absolutely. I love that. I actually am going to move that to the top, which is ask, don't tell about needs. Because you're right, it is so easy to assume what somebody else might need. And you should start with the mindset of, I don't know what it is, and you are the only person who can tell me because you're the one who's involved here, right? I think that's great. Being curious, yep, asking, doing research on our own. So maybe something about being prepared as well, and not just coming in and expecting people to like answer questions for you, right? Of being ready and being knowledgeable. I don't really know how I would word that, but I do like that. Being knowledgeable, maybe, how can I put that? I'm going to come back to that, Allison, because I do think that that's something that needs to go in here. Encouraging Western farm, being prepared. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Let's call it being knowledgeable and prepared about context, maybe? How does that sound? Let's see. Encouraging Western firms to source talent. Oh, from the diaspora. That's a great point. Yeah. I really like that. Guys, there's no way I can fit all this in one slide. This is excellent work. Hopefully we can curate this someplace else, because this is an ongoing conversation that of course needs to happen. Challenging my own beliefs about what development. Yeah, totally. I think I've been using that phrase for lack of a better way to put it. But yeah, you're totally right. Even the language around it should probably be changed. We should be referring to different countries in different ways. I know there's been lots of conversations on this. And so yeah, that's something that certainly needs to be different. Let's see, including activities, respecting culture. Yes, absolutely. I think that could go under being respectful, humble, being more inclusive. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, let's add that in here. By the way, these are not in any order. I'm just typing these as I see them in here. Being inclusive of people who are not designers. I'm just going to leave it at be inclusive because that also includes people who may not otherwise come across your radar, right? I think that's a pretty big space. Don't walk, hey, Yakita, hi there. Don't walk in with stereotypes and assumptions. Yes, absolutely. Where could that go under? I just want to read through some of these and then I can think through how to add them in here. In our meetup groups, we're addressing the topic of accessibility. Yeah, going to understand accessibility from lower LSM markets. Yeah, yes. You know, that point about the downloading large files and all that has come up in my work a lot. It's surprising how even things like, oh, we should create an app that people can download. I mean, for somebody like me who has maybe a really a broad data plan that's included with my phone, that's easy for me to say. And I also have access to Wi-Fi, but somebody who maybe is paying for every single gigabyte that they're downloading, that's not easy. That's a choice they have to make about financial models, right? And I think you're right, Mika, that's a great point. Embrace diversity. Oh, I like that. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, oh, cool. You lived in Joburg as a kid. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm from India. I grew up here in the US, but I spent a lot of time as a kid in India in my parents' home. So obviously I am not from Africa by any means, but in a parallel way, I think I've also been seeing how this plays out between the tension between South Asian work and Western world. Yeah, there's some parallels there, I think. And so it's nice to hear that you also, that's something that interests you as well. Snaps, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna add embrace diversity because I like that. You can see, I'm sure that I'm getting off of my slide here. Maria, how are we doing on time, by the way? I see that I'm 5 minutes over my allotted time. How are we doing?
Yeah, we're a little bit over time, but yeah.
Okay, sorry.
You can finish with the whatever people wrote and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. I will wrap it up then. Okay, so guys, I see you have excellent ideas in here. I don't want this to stop right now. This, like I said, this is not intended to be the time we fix all of this. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. It's going to take a long time for us to really figure out, what we can do to best support the talent that we hope to help. And honestly, I think World Class Designer, this whole conference is an amazing first step. I think this is one of the coolest conferences that I've been to in recent memory. And so I'm really excited that you're all here and that I'm here as well. And I'm honored that I was able to at least bring up this conversation with all of you. Please keep adding to the chat. Even after this talk is over, I'll try and come back and check in on it later on. I'll try and post this as well somewhere. Guys, if you want to take this and run, start these and put them out in the world as principles to develop more broadly, feel free. I did not need my name attached to this. In fact, I don't want it to be that way. I wanted this to be a community thing. So please, let's keep this conversation going. Thank you all for coming. Here's my last slide with my Twitter information if anybody was curious about that. And yeah, thank you all. This was really great. And I'm glad that you all participated and were interactive. And thank you, Maria, again, for hosting me.
Thank
I really
you so much.
appreciate this.
Yeah, that was great. I think that was the most interactive session we had today. And I really like that you
Good.
the audience and I really like your attitude. It's not just a talk, but it's something that is opening the starting point, right? The community thing.
Yes.
So yeah, we will definitely keep that ball rolling. Thank you so much.
Great. I hope so. Thank you all again. Keep working on this. And yeah, I'll see you guys at the other sessions in the conference. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.